Hello, welcome back to Index 1, or our second video for the Voxel Heist, my tutorial series. In this episode, we'll be looking at lighting and materials. I'll also be covering things from my first episode. So, some hotkeys that I didn't delve into. When an edit has been made in your scene, you'll see a little asterisk next to the name of the scene. As a default, it will be sample scene, but this asterisk shows that there are unsaved changes to your scene. All you need to do is either go to File, Save, or you can see the shortcut, which is Control and S on a Windows keyboard. So if I press Control and S on my keyboard, the asterisk goes away, and I know that I've saved my project. Another thing, you can rename objects by right-clicking them, or you can rename them up here. As I said in the last episode, I'll be using models that I've made in a software called Magica Voxel. You don't need to worry about this. As for our tutorial, you may be able to find models online that you like, or if you're able to create your own, or just stay with the default shapes. Within Unity, we have different lights. As I had in the last episode, we have the Directional Light, which acts as our sun. We can rotate it and see how it affects our levels in terms of brightness and shadow. We're also able to change the temperature of the light, and I'll give you a rough idea of which style of lighting it will be representing. Currently, it is direct sunlight. However, if I go to warmer tones, you'll see that this now acting as a fluorescent light. Then we have an incandescent light, and finally a candle light. Going back to direct sunlight and go to the cooler tones, we have a cloudy skylight, shade but with clear sky, and a blue sky. I'll just reset this back to the default direct sunlight. We're also able to change the intensity, so how bright our light is, and we also have some settings for the shadows made by the light. Depending on how resource intensive you'd like your game to be, you can either do no shadows, so the computer doesn't have to render the shadows, hard shadows. These are a bit easier for the computer to generate. As you can see, the shadows have a hard border. Or soft shadows, where it has like a little fuzziness like it would in real life. We also have an option for some other lights. So on the left, going to the hierarchy, which is the window on the left, we can right click to look at our options for light. We'll see quite a few options here, but today we'll be looking at directional light, which I've just shown, a point light and a spotlight. We've already brought them into our scene, but as you can see they're greyed out or hidden. I can turn off the directional light. It's still in our scene, but it's no longer rendered. I can now turn these lights on, and you'll see our point light and spotlight. This is by clicking this little box in the top left of the name. Firstly, we'll look at our point light. This is a point in space that light radiates from. In our light component, in emission, we can either go by colour or temperature, like we had on our directional light. Or we can colour it ourselves and change the intensity. The higher the intensity, the brighter the light. Lower than 1, it will be darker. We can also change the range that the light affects, so how far the light can actually travel within our scene. Point lights are a good way of making, for example, a torch. If we add a cube and change the scale of it to resemble a pole or a torch, we can move our point light onto it just by dragging and dropping. And then we can zero out its position, so putting zeros in all of the position X, Y, and Z, and move it to the top. This is now in essence a torch. Now you may have noticed that there is an icon displaying where the light is coming from, but it's currently kind of in the way. We can turn off the gizmos such as this by pressing the button in the top right. Now we can move it around. Another hotkey that I had assumed people would know is Control and Z, or Control and Z, to undo changes that have been made. Another thing in terms of feedback that I had received is that my pivot point was at a different place to a fresh install of Unity. When I have my player model selected, it's centered. When the player object is selected, it's at the foot of the model. This is because of my current settings for pivot. Having it set to pivot centers all of the changes to the current object in isolation. It's ignoring the children on the object. Setting it to center sets the pivot to the averaged center of the game object and all of its children. Personally, I like keeping it as pivot, but that is just my preference. Carrying on now to our other light by disabling the point light and enabling the spotlight. Spotlights are good for flashlights that can be held by the player. If I move our flashlight back and turn up the intensity, you can see how the light interacts with the environment. We're also able to change the circles, which affect how the light looks. Doing this can affect the softness of the light falling off toward the edge. Again, like with our other lights that we've seen, we're able to change the colour of the light. Turning our directional light back on, we will now be looking at materials. Materials are what make the game objects appear like they do. Importing my Voxel player character, which I made in Magica Voxel, you can see that he looks rather skeletal currently. But that's because he has the default Unity material on him. However, in the software that I made him in, I painted him with a colour scheme that I wanted. So we're firstly going to create a folder to house the generic materials. Right click and create and click folder. However, because this material we're about to make is specific to one game object, I'm going to create the material in the folder of the player model. Similarly to making a folder, the material, we're going to right click, create, and then click on material. I'm going to name this following a naming convention that I'd learnt in college, which is a lowercase m showing the type that it is, so a material, an underscore, and then the name of what the material is. So then I drag it onto the character as you see, nothing has really changed, as the settings for the material that we've just made are the default settings. Opening the material, you can see we have a lot of settings, but hovering over different options will show the built-in Unity tooltip, which will give you a brief description of what it does. You can mess around with the material, changing its settings to see what happens, and to get the look of the material that you would like the appearance of. Surface type can be opaque or transparent. Essentially, if you don't want the player to see through the material, choose opaque. Otherwise, if it's like a cloudy window or something, you can choose transparent. Render face is for, well, models have different faces, which make up the model. This option chooses which side of those faces are rendered. So if you don't ever see the inside of a model, only render the front faces, which are the model's faces that are looking outward. If I render back faces, you'll see it's the other side of the faces being rendered, so we can only see the interior. A good idea for optimization is to just render front faces if you don't see the interior. If you render both, it will be using resources that are unnecessary. For our base map, it is a basic colour that the model is, or the material is. You're also able to put images into the squares that are to the left of these surface inputs. This is good for more specific colours or details that you want to add or have already made. I can drag the image that I got from exporting my model from Magica Voxel. This has the detail information for the base colour, so now we can see what my character looks like from when I first made them. For my materials, especially on voxel models, I like going for a plastic look. I do this by turning the smoothness down, leaving just a little bit. Even if you don't have a player model or any images to drag onto your material, that's fine. You can still follow along with a capsule or a cube, and a colour of your choice if you like. Today is just about learning what we can achieve with materials in Unity. The other surface inputs are for more detailed models. Adding a normal map or a height map can make a model appear to be higher detail without having to model a higher detailed model. But again, that's getting more into modelling than our current basic Unity tutorial. Emission is about light that is being given off by a model, such as a light bulb or an exit sign. Now I will show you where materials actually end up when we drag them onto our object. Clicking on the GameObjects, that is the host of the mesh filter and mesh renderer, you can see that the mesh renderer has a group called materials. By clicking on a cube, you can see that it has the default Unity URP material lit. Now that we have a decent grasp on materials, it's time to have a look at some more lighting settings. These lighting settings are going to be different, or going to be for the entire game, rather than the individual lights that we can place. So I have my lighting window here as a default, but you can open it by clicking on Window, Rendering, then Lighting. In the first window, we're able to create new light settings, which can host the light settings for our level or world. We also have a few other tabs like Environment. This is what holds our skybox. This is the image that we can see around our scene. We can remove it from the environment by hovering over it and pressing delete. Or we can go to the main camera in our hierarchy, making sure we have the inspector tab selected, going to environment and changing the background type. I'll choose a neutral colour for the background. For my scene, what I'm going to do is remove the placeholder model for our player and drag my player character model onto the player game object. I'll zero this out by typing 0 into every position coordinate. I'm then going to change the directional light, which is acting as our sun currently, to be straight down on the player. I want this because I want it to feel like it's a well-lit warehouse or something that has lighting above the player. I'd also like the light's temperature to roughly match the colour you'd get from a man-made fluorescent light. Now, time for a bit of clearing up. I'm going to create an empty game object and call it environment. I'm going to drag the floor onto that and also remove the cube and the temporary lights that were made. Alrighty, I'm going to leave the project here, but we will be back next episode to begin learning some basics of C#. Also, I forgot to do this in episode 1, but I'm going to start giving some tasks for you to do to continue to mess around and play with whatever we've gone over in our walkthrough. So, your tasks for today are: firstly, create a capsule and set its position to 2, 2, 2 and its rotation to 45, 45, 45. Should look something like this. Your next task is to create a material and set its colour to the hexadecimal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I hadn't pointed this out earlier, but it was an option in creating a material earlier in the video. Oh, and I also set its smoothness to 0. So, I'll leave this challenge for you to find it on your own accord and simply drag and drop the material onto your capsule. You'll be able to check it against what I'm showing here to see how close that you got. This is simply just a challenge that you can help use to navigate areas of Unity. Please don't feel pressured to do it. I just think it can help you learn through muscle memory for doing different aspects of Unity, as we'll be covering quite a few different areas throughout the series. But with that said and done, next episode we'll be looking into learning the basics of C#, the coding language that we'll be using in Unity. Thank you all for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe, as it will help build my motivation to keep the series going. I'll see you next time.